everybody, it's Kendra here. Welcome back to part 3 of my Knitting Basics series. I am so glad you've joined me, and if you've missed it, to recap, part 1 in this series was all about the supplies you need to get started knitting. Part 2 is all about how to knit the knit stitch as well as a simple cast on. And today in part 3 we are going to go over purling. So knitting like this, where you knit both sides, is called garter stitch, and you'll see that in patterns written. Garter stitch means you just knit whichever direction you're going, and that creates a row of knits and a row of these bumps, a row of the flat stitches and a row of the bumps, which are made from the purl stitch. So when you alternate one row of knit stitches and one row of purl stitches, that's called stockinette or stocking stitch. And again, that's something else you'll see written in patterns, and it creates a much more smooth look. Smooth on one side and then more bumps all on the other side, rather than alternating between the rows. Alright, so once I have a few rows down, I'm going to do a very simple cast off or a bind off. And by doing that, I'm going to do 1 knit, 2 knit, and then put my needle in and pass the back stitch over the front. And then I'm going to knit the next one, pass the back stitch over the front, knit, pass the back, and I'm going to keep on going to the end, and that's just going to be how I bind off this small square. So now that I'm to the end, I'm going to snip this. I'm going to pull the yarn through the loop. So for my second square, I'm going to start it off the same way, and that is to create the slip knot, and I'll go through this a little bit quicker this time. Pulling it through, and put my needle in, and I'm going to use the same method for casting on. I'm going to still go with the 10 stitches. And I do want to demonstrate the purl stitch, but I'm going to begin by doing the first row all in knit stitches. I'm going to knit all 10 stitches all the way across. So now we're going to do the purl stitch, which is the next thing you need to learn when you are learning how to knit. And when we do this, the yarn stays in the front. Now with knitting, the yarn always came from the back. When you're doing a purl stitch, it comes in the front. So we do this by putting our needle in through the front loop, but this time we're going in front. Again, to do a knit stitch, you go to the back, purl stitch, you come to the front. Now you take your working yarn and you wrap it. Now it's kind of the same thing where you push it through and you've got that loop hanging out on your right hand needle and you slide it off. Then you can use your working yarn to tighten it up if you need, and you're going to do the same thing where you put it in, you wrap it around, pull it through, and slide it off. We're going to keep on going all the way to the end with this same technique. You put it in, wrap it around, slide it through, and off. Again, I hold my yarn the same way when I'm purling, but when you're learning, do whatever is most comfortable for you. It's the motion of the yarn that needs to be the same. Put it in, wrap it around, through, and off. So in this little sample I am making stockinette stitch, like I mentioned before. So that means you alternate. You do 1 row of knitting, 1 row of purling, 1 row of knitting, 1 row of purling. So you can see that it's starting to look a little bit different. But since I just did a purl row, I'm going to do a knit row. So now that we're to the end, you can slide out your stitches. Again, make sure at the end of every row you're counting. Make sure you're still at 10 stitches. Now we're going to flip it, and your yarn, if you pull it to the back, it's going to make this funny double 2 lines rather than only the 1. That just means you need to pull it to the front, lay it flat, and you'll see you only have 1 stitch there, and this part here is the front of the purl bump. If you notice things are kind of looking here, you see your yarn at the back, pull it around to the front and you should see that this stitch looks the same as this one. So you need this yarn to be in the front like this. And again, with purls, you want the yarn at the front. You put your needle coming up so it is in front of the back needle. Wrap it through and off. And you just keep on repeating that same stitch over and over again. The knit stitch and the purl stitch are what is used to make ribbings for hats. It can be used in combination to make a seed stitch. There's lots of options of what you can do with these two stitches, and alternating rows is just one thing. So I'm going to show you the difference now between these two little swatches that I'm knitting up for you. So this first one used a knit stitch every single row, and both sides look the same in garter stitch, where it's one row that's smooth and one row of the bump. And so when you're counting garter stitch, it's easy to count how many rows you have that bump on it. Now with knit stitch, you can see here, and it's flat on one side, and if we flip it over, on the back side, it's a bump every single row. Again, comparing it to the garter stitch, this one is a little more spaced out because there is those knit stitches in between. This one's bumps on one side and flat on the other. A lot of garments you find are like this, right? Where you can see those little V's, and each one of those little pieces is a stitch. So in an upcoming video, I am going to go over how to fix mistakes if you drop one of these loops, then what? Or else doing things like checking your gauge and changing your needle sizes compared to your yarn size. So if you're interested in that, subscribe to see those videos coming up. And otherwise, I will see you next time. Bye.